So I'm going to hand it over to Lindsay and Kim, or Kim and Lindsay, and they're going to take about 20 minutes to sort of brief you on what this thing is about, and then and then they'll hand it over to me. I'll talk about the group discussion part of it, and then we'll have all the rest of the time for questions. There are also everything you're seeing, we will share with you. You'll get an email from us tomorrow with the deck. Any of the materials we reference, we will send to you, so you don't have to worry about getting anything. We'll make sure you get it. All right, over to you, Kim and Lindsay.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Can you? Yes, you can see the slide deck. Excellent. So thank you all for joining us. Small but wonderful team. So the purpose of this session, we've had a number of them, but we're going to be talking about how you can lead a group discussion and the resources we've created for you. We'll start off with a land acknowledgement. So the City of Toronto acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. The city also acknowledges that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. I'll also deliver the African ancestral acknowledgement. Though I am not a person of African descent, I am committed to continually acting in support of and in solidarity with Black communities seeking freedom and reparative justice in light of the history and ongoing legacy of slavery that continues to impact Black communities in Canada. As a part of this commitment, I would also like to acknowledge that not all people came to these lands as migrants or settlers. Specifically, I wish to acknowledge those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. In support of the City of Toronto's ongoing efforts to confront anti-Black racism, I pay tribute to these ancestors of African origin and descent. So I'll just pass it over to my colleague, Lindsay.
Thank you, Kim. If anybody has any trouble hearing me or anything as I'm going through, please let me know. I'm going to go over a quick outline right now of what you'll see in this slide deck. It's a bit of an overview of TransformTO background, looking at some of our principles and timelines related to the work that we're doing right now. The path to net zero, so where are we currently, and showing you some data around that. The Net Zero Action Plan is what we're working on right now, taking us from 2026 to 2030, and that's what this public consultation process is intended to inform. We'll get into that a little bit. And then the last part of this will be hosting group discussions. So that'll be a combination of myself and then handing it over to Nicole and third-party public to speak a little bit about that. And then, of course, there will be time at the end for Q&A and discussion as needed. Next slide, please. Perfect. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the TransformTO Net Zero strategy and the action plan. Next slide. These are the TransformTO guiding principles. So these principles are some of the foundations that we use when developing both the initial TransformTO plan back in 2017, as well as the updated plan for net zero in 2021. And it's what we look to as we develop our individual action plans as well. So we want to advance social equity, protect low-income residents, improve affordability, particularly for vulnerable populations. We're looking to enhance and strengthen the local economy, not detract from it. We want to maintain and create good quality local jobs in the green sector as well, improve public health, contribute to poverty reduction, as well as creating resilient communities and infrastructure. And you'll see some of these themes weaved through the work, as well as the questions in the discussion guide and the survey that we have prepared. Next slide, please. So what is the TransformTO Net Zero strategy? You may be already well aware of this, so I'll just sort of go over it briefly. As you may know, TransformTO was originally adopted by Council back in 2017. Then council declared a climate emergency in 2019 and tasked city staff with developing a more rigorous strategy with net zero as the end goal. So in December of 2021, the TransformTO net zero strategy was created and adopted by City Council. The long-term goal of net zero emissions by 2040 is the ultimate endpoint of that strategy. So that strategy is more of a long-term strategy. The interim targets that we have are a 65% reduction in emissions by 2030 from a 1990 baseline. So we need to look both to our shorter term targets as well as our long-term targets, and those are all culminated in this TransformTO Net Zero Strategy Report, which is available on our website if you haven't seen it already. It's quite a lengthy report, and there are quite a lot of sort of technical appendices and things, but it's got a lot of really good information in it if you are looking for that. Now, just to level set, so what are net zero emissions? Net zero emissions are achieved when we stop emitting greenhouse gases from the ways that we live, work, and travel. The goal is for us to sort of reduce greenhouse gas emissions as low as feasibly possible. We want to get as close to zero as we can. There's still some uncertainty with respect to how close to zero we can get, and also how close we can get to zero today might look very different when we get to 2040 and how close we think we can get to zero by then. So that's ongoing work that the city and others internationally are doing. And then the idea is that when we get to zero as close as possible, the remaining emissions would be balanced out by things like carbon removal and carbon credits. So just from sort of a definition point of view. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this takes us now to the Net Zero Strategy Action Plan. So as I mentioned, the Net Zero Strategy is that sort of longer term, broader strategy that takes us to 2040. As you can imagine, the actions and different elements, complexities that are needed in order to achieve net zero by 2040 are quite significant. So being able to break that strategy down into sort of more digestible short-term action plans is the approach that the city has been taking. So the action plan that was originally produced was from 2022 to the end of 2025. So it's the one that we're in currently. That plan included a set of 30 actions in 7 key sectors with a whole bunch of different sub-actions. Again, that report is available online if you want to take a look at all the detail. What we're doing now is developing what will be the next iteration of the short-term plan. So the next plan will take us from 2026 to 2030. It's a pretty significant action plan because, as I mentioned earlier in the slides, we do have 2030 goals. So that plan will sort of be our last short-term plan to try to get us to those short-term interim goals by 2030. This work is currently under development, and the public consultation that we're undertaking now is intended to inform this work. It does look mostly at greenhouse gas mitigation in terms of the actions, but it does weave in resilience elements as well, as you'll see. Next slide, please. This figure shows a bit of a timeline related to our net zero action plan. So as you can see at the top, this looks at the different internal and external engagements that are happening. So the city, as we develop different strategies and plans, we always do internal engagement with the different divisions, agencies, and corporations that we work with. There's also a technical modeling process that's underway that looks at the technical feasibility of reaching net zero, what technologies are available to us currently, and then sort of looking at different pieces of the puzzle as they relate to where the city can take action, where other levels of government can take action, the public, and so forth. As you can see, as we move into winter 2025 along that timeline, we're going into action plan development. So all of the work that's done through this public consultation and all the folks we're speaking with, including yourselves, all of this gets rolled up into the development of our action plan, which will go forward to IEC, which is our Infrastructure and Environment Committee. And then later in June, it will also go to City Council. So underneath, Kim. Underneath the dotted line, you'll see that we have engagement with our Climate Advisory Group. This is a group of 25 individuals citywide that provide us advice, and we have discussions about climate issues. They have been advising us, they're in their end of their second year now. from all different walks of life and all different areas of expertise. And so they're another avenue that we seek to obtain input from different members of the public for our plans. And then at the very bottom, you can see that we are here. This public consultation, as you may be aware, launched at the very end of October and will extend until the end of January. So with any of the meetings that you guys are doing with your buildings and your neighborhoods and your Rotary, anything that you're able to do between now and the end of January can be captured as part of this public consultation. Next slide, please. So the path to net zero, where are we currently? Next slide. I'm going to take you through a little bit of information just to level set sort of where we've come from and where we hope to go. What you can see here are three sort of examples of reports that are all publicly available to you if you would like some late night reading. The first one on the left is the annual TransformTO Net Zero Progress and Accountability Report. So we produce annual reports that talk about essentially our progress on achieving net zero. So there's a number of different things that feed into that report, a number of different processes within the city, and we look to have a better understanding of sort of what we're achieving in relation to those short-term action plan that I mentioned, as well as sort of understanding where we're at in terms of meeting our broader and longer-term net zero goals. One of the key pieces to understanding our progress on net zero is the image that's in the middle, which is the 2021 sector-based emissions inventory. It's quite a mouthful, but it essentially just explains the fact that we look at different sectors, mostly buildings, transportation, and waste. We look at those every single year to understand where we are in terms of our greenhouse gas emissions, both as a city corporately, but also as the city of Toronto broadly. So the 2021 inventory is the most recent one that we have publicly available. The 2022 inventory will be released in December. So if you're interested, you can keep an eye out for that. It will have the 2022 data related to GHG, greenhouse gas emissions. The reason for the lag, I mean, it's 2024. The reason for the lag is that there's an extensive amount of data that has to go into developing this inventory. And some of those data are not made available from the province and from federal sources until well after the year has ended. So by the time all those data come together and we're able to pull that inventory together, it's usually a 2-year lag. And then the last report that's shown here is a community-wide consumption-based emissions inventory report. If you are interested or know a little bit about consumption-based emissions, it's something that you're welcome to take a look at. And Kim's going to be sharing the TransformTO email as well. So if you have any sort of questions or anything, you can feel free to kind of speak to that. Consumption-based emissions broadly are things that emissions that are produced when we look outside of the boundaries of Toronto. And so the emissions-based inventory, the sector-based inventory that I mentioned really looks at the inner workings of Toronto. And there's a lot of detailed jargon that we could get into about different scopes of emissions and things. If you're interested, I'm glad to chat about it after this presentation, but just flagging for you that these pieces of information are available. Next slide. Thank you. So from the 2021 sectoral greenhouse gas emissions report, this is information and figures pulled directly from that report. What you'll see here is the 3 different sectors that we really focus on that emit the most greenhouse gas emissions for Toronto are buildings, shown in green, transportation, shown in blue, and then waste, which is shown in red. And what you can probably immediately identify from this figure is the fact that buildings is the overwhelming sort of majority, followed by transportation, and then followed further by waste. So buildings have been the primary source of greenhouse gas emissions in Toronto for some time. As of 2021, they accounted for 56% of community-wide emissions, which was a slight decrease in emissions from the 58% that was seen in 2020. The transportation sector is the second largest, that's the blue, and that accounts for 35%. And that's a 2% increase actually from what we saw in 2020. And third, the waste sector emissions, which are primarily emissions from landfill, were 9% of emissions in 2021, and this remained relatively stable. We'll get into a little bit more detail on some of these in the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. So the Toronto greenhouse gas emissions by sector, if you look at the diagram previously, the green, the blue, and the red, these three diagrams break each of those down individually. So we'll look at buildings, that 56% from buildings. What you can see is that 55% of that is largely related to residential buildings, followed by 34% for commercial and institutional buildings, and then only 11% is industrial buildings. Giving us a better understanding of where our emissions come from allow us to more effectively develop our net zero strategies and plans. If we don't have the data to understand where our emissions come from, it becomes really hard to understand sort of how to tackle them. Jasmine, is it Jasmine or Jasmine? Okay, either one's fine. You mentioned that, you're looking to focus on buildings emissions and building decarbonization. And as you can see here, the emissions inventory clearly shows that, that's a really good place to do some of that work because of the potential impact it would have. Now for transportation, as you can see, an overwhelmingly large part of that is passenger vehicles, 68%. Followed by 16% for commercial and light vehicles, 15% for heavy vehicles, and 1% for others. So this includes things like waste trucks, marine, aviation. It's sort of a catch-all for those other elements. So really, we want to look at residential building emissions, and in terms of transportation, we want to focus in on passenger vehicle emissions. And waste, 98% of the emissions from waste are from landfill, organics, and yard waste. So for landfill, it's largely methane that's in the ground. That contributes to that, and then 2% from wastewater. Next slide, please. So this graph, it might be a little bit small. I apologize, it's hard to see, but what it's showing along the side is the greenhouse gas emissions, so the amount of emissions, and along the bottom is a timeline. And what this is trying to show you, so the blue line speaks to the different GHG emission points that we have. So you can see that when you look at the 1990 dot on the far left, that we are definitely lower. We have been trending downward overall with our GHG emissions as a city. We were below the 2020 target, as you can see in red, but also plotted are the 2025 targets, the 2030 targets, and then the 2040 targets. So you can see here that the decline that we need to be able to continue in order to reach those additional targets is pretty steep. So in terms of the actual amounts, we have 14.5 megatons in 2021. That was actually a 4% increase over 2020. And why that's important is, while we're looking at the city of Toronto greenhouse gas emissions, I think everybody recognizes that climate is, a national and a global issue. So what happens globally directly impacts Toronto and our greenhouse gas emissions. So the fact that in 2020, we were definitely clearly seeing the effects of COVID. A lot of people staying at home, people not traveling to and from work. And so the greenhouse gas emissions profile really does reflect that change in the way that society functioned. Overall, we're at 41% less than 1990 levels. And then in comparison to 2019, emissions were 9% lower in 2021. However, it is expected most of this was due to the impacts of COVID. The idea that we may continue to see a rebound from those effects of COVID in 2022 is also possible. Next slide, please. So we're going to get into the public consultation for the TransformTO Net Zero Strategy Action Plan. This is part of the presentation where I'll get us kicked off with some information, and then the third-party folks will take over and provide a little bit more detail related to some of those discussion guides if you're looking to facilitate those group talks. Next slide, please. So the objective of this public consultation, it's aiming to do a number of different things. So these visuals were selected because they really try to convey the idea that when we talk about climate, we're talking about multiple complex factors. And two of the ones that we really focused on with this consultation are resilience or adaptation and mitigation. And while the two are definitely related and intertwined, there are some distinctions that we'll talk about a little bit. So we wanted to talk about how climate is actually impacting people. So the picture on the left shows the flooding of the Don Valley. It shows, why are you concerned about climate change and interested in what you can do? So the question there is, a lot of us have felt the impacts of climate change, right? We've seen warmer weather, both in the summer and often in the winter. We've seen days where, there's heavier rainfall, lots of different sort of changing weather patterns, more severe weather happening at more frequent intervals. So we really want to understand, how is climate, do people see impacts of climate in their daily lives, and what does that look like, and how is it affecting them? And then on the other hand, we're looking at, things like greenhouse gas mitigation. So how people live and work and travel really does affect, as I showed you, those greenhouse gas emissions inventories that we track, and getting a better understanding of, what are some of the barriers and challenges and obstacles that people are facing in their everyday lives. We recognize people have a lot of things to worry about and a lot on their plates. And, sometimes worrying about climate is a priority and sometimes it's not. And we want to understand where some of those barriers and challenges might be affecting people's ability to act if they want to act, and then what supports we can provide in those cases. So that's just a high level overview of some of the sort of objectives and intentions behind the public consultation. Next slide, please. So as I alluded to, how is the hotter, wetter, and wilder weather impacting you? It's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek way to say, that we do recognize, this is a serious issue, and heat is a serious issue, flooding is a serious issue, and severe weather for many people ends up being a serious issue. So, the data we have now shows that the number of days per year with temperatures above 30 degrees Celsius in Toronto, we call these extreme heat days. You'll hear things, extreme heat alerts and the like. It's already increased from an average of only 8 days in 1950s to about 18 days per year now. So that is a significant increase in what we would consider a pretty short amount of time from the perspective of climate. If global emissions continue to rise, extreme heat days could increase to 29 days by the 2030s, which feels very soon, and to 54 days by the 2060s. So this trend that we're seeing now is looking to increase and potentially get even more severe. And so these are the data that are sort of concerning us, and that we're looking to understand the impacts of this, but also looking at how we can mitigate it going forward. Next slide, please. So this is the other piece of things where we're looking to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions collectively, the City of Toronto as a corporation, and then the Toronto community broadly. So what are the most important things we can do to reduce emissions? This goes back to that greenhouse gas emissions inventory information that I showed you. Heating single-family homes is the single largest source of emissions in Toronto, how people heat their homes. And so if you're a homeowner, if you're someone who has a home and you are able to make the decisions about how your home is heated, you can reduce your emissions through home retrofits and by fuel switching away from the use of natural gas heating to something like an electric heat pump. So just empowering people to understand that where those decision-making powers are available to folks, that is an option that they do have. Now, the other thing that's important is that how people travel does impact their greenhouse gas emissions. So gasoline combustion is the second largest source of emissions. As I mentioned, the personal vehicles, 68%. So by doing things like taking transit, by walking, cycling, or driving an electric vehicle, depending on which of those are available to you, you can reduce your emissions and potentially save money as well. Active transportation also has those additional health benefits. And as I mentioned in the guiding principles earlier on, public health considerations related to active transportation and air quality, all those good things are something that we consider in our work. And last, but definitely not least, is that you can use your voice. So joining a group that already works on climate issues, which it sounds like both of you are involved already in some local climate groups, or groups that are looking at climate in addition to other things, which is fantastic. And then encouraging others to reduce the impacts of climate change. So by having conversations with friends, family, classmates, and coworkers, we can collectively inspire and support change in our community. Next slide, please. So this is a quick video that we're going to show you, just that shows about some of the impacts that changes in your daily life and the way you travel can have an impact on GHGs, and it's pretty cool. So take a quick look.
Everyone can help Toronto meet our climate change goals. Watch what happens when people mostly walk and bike instead of drive. This is a neighborhood where everyone drives. The red dots represent cars. On the right is a neighborhood where people walk up to 30 minutes or take their bicycle one day a week instead of driving. You can see that the neighborhood where everyone drives is covered in more red clouds, which represents greenhouse gas emissions, and the neighborhood where people walk or cycle has fewer greenhouse gas emissions. Help meet Toronto's climate change goals. Complete a quick survey at toronto.ca/net zero action plan. Everyone can help.
Perfect. Thank you. So as you can see, that video was just sort of a quick snippet. It's not Toronto. It's sort of an example of a town. And it's just trying to illustrate for folks that, you know, we do have the ability, both individually and collectively, to make a difference. And the impact is that, you know, our air is cleaner, our GHG emissions are reduced, and then in the case of active transportation, which is the one that was shown in the video, there's also, you know, benefits to physical health as well. I am going to put Nicole on the spot to ask, or Kim, is that video available for folks online currently?
It's actually been slightly updated, and it will be available in the next day or two, for the next couple of months, so that if you want to share it when you're having your group discussion. We've made a few improvements. We keep getting feedback, and so it's not technically live, but it will be imminently.
Okay. So that's great. So that's an additional, you know, piece of information or something interesting that you can share with your groups once it's posted, which will be shortly. So this is the last slide for me before I hand it off to Nicole and third party to get into some of the details of the discussion guide and the public consultation materials that we have available for you. So the consultation process, which you are actively participating in by attending this session, is including a lot of different materials. One of the ways to get involved is through the online survey. If you haven't already filled out the survey for yourselves individually, I would encourage you to do so. Also, if you are hosting group discussions, there's a way through that survey link to also report back on the results of those group discussions, which Nicole will get into a little bit more detail on. There's webinars that are being held, as well as group discussions. I'll stress that a group discussion can be you and one other person. It can be you and 100 other people. It can be family. It can be friends. It can be sort of anybody. So just keep that in mind. And then there's also been a series of in-person pop-up events throughout the city in November, and then those will continue into the new year as available. And then as you can see there, the link is toronto.ca/net zero action plan, where all of the materials are posted and available for use. And then the consultation period officially closes January the 31st. So anything you want to contribute through that survey or contribute the results of your group discussions, please post them to us through that link before the end of January. And with that, I will hand it over to Nicole.
Awesome, thanks. I'm wondering, Lindsay, given that there's just two folks, do you guys want to take a small pause before I walk you through how we were thinking about the group thing? Do you have any questions about TransformTO, or like maybe separately from the consultation process itself, like anything from Lindsay's presentation that, you know, you wanted to jump in on or ask a question about or anything? All right, Lindsay, good job. Forget it then. We'll keep going. I'll just show you. I think I had some slides, but I actually think since it's such a small group, I'm just going to use the website just to orient you to what's there and walk you through it a little bit. And if you unmute yourself if you want, then jump in and say, stop, Nicole, like I want to check that out. So let me just show you what I'm doing here. Okay. So you can see the website, right? Good. Okay. So this is the Net Zero Action Plan website that Lindsay just had. And here you can see complete a survey. and there's ways to provide feedback that are consistent with what Lindsay just did. So there's an info sheet, which is kind of like a 4-page version of what Lindsay just presented. Let me just, then there's a group discussion guide. So if you want to convene some folks, and again, it's totally voluntary. We had some people wonder if this was something where they were forced to do this, as part of their group, but in no way whatsoever are you obviously forced to do it. Then these are the schedule of pop-ups, and that continues to be expanded. So we're in places just stopping people and talking to them with display boards that are very similar to what Lindsay just presented. But what I wanted to show you was this sort of group discussion guide first. So if you click on it, I'll make it a little smaller, but it's basically saying it includes tips to support your group discussion. And one of the resources you can use is from the website. Here it says info sheet. It's another thing that you can pull up and say, okay, friends, if you're, it's what Lindsay presented, but a shorter version. It's like a 4-pager that says the climate is changing, the crisis is more urgent. Here's some information about extreme heat and cost and that kind of stuff. The fact that the city is already doing a lot of things, the 3 actions, again, heating, transportation, and using your voice, and then a little screenshot of the video. So if you want to show people stuff, that's a good place to go to, the info sheet. So I'll just go back to the main website. So on the group discussion guide, what we've put together are a few tips on how you might want to do it. So there's the little screen grab of the info sheet. This QR code takes you straight to the survey, but you can set a time and a place. Basically, you want to connect with people, say, hey, let's talk about it on this day at this time, whatever. We will send you the links to all of these directly, even though you can go to the website and do it. Also, in previous briefings, some of the group leaders said, can you send me a few hard copies? Like, it'd be easier for me if I had this in a hard copy, I could give it to my neighbors or in my building or whatever. So we're also happy to make photocopies and send you color copies of stuff. We also have posters in all the libraries in Toronto about this. So set a time and a place for connecting with people. Use that information sheet as a resource. Encourage everyone that you're talking to share their experiences and perspectives. We always encourage people to take notes, and this group discussion guide has space for notes, and you might want to take your own notes. And we always remind people that it's totally okay if people disagree, right? Like, if you're going to be wading in to kind of provoke a discussion, you are not there to tell them what to do. This is, you'll see through the nature of the questions that people might answer them differently. And then upload your notes to the survey website. So we've basically just designed it so that when you reply to the survey, you can either say you're replying as an individual or you're replying on behalf of a group. And I think we've had 17 groups already fill it out. And we've had like over 300 people fill it out. We're hoping that we get a lot more. So the questions, they're in 2 sections. One set is on climate adaptation. So when you say to people, have you noticed the changes in the weather, and is it bothering you? What are you doing to deal with it? This is that kind of set of questions, and there's 1 page, and I'll just show you the next one. This is a set of questions on GHG emission reductions, and we just used a little more space, so it's a couple pages. So it's 5 questions each. And these questions are not intended to constrain your discussion. They're intended to let people know what information would be most helpful for the city. If your discussion goes in a different way, do not worry about it. It is the act of even having the conversation that is so helpful. But for the structure that's here, it's super straight up. Is the hotter, wetter, wilder weather impacting you? If so, how? What changes have you made in your day-to-day life to adapt to the changing climate? And these are working in the mall, so it'll work with your groups. Like, you stop a stranger, they're getting it. Are there any significant barriers or challenges that you face to adapting to the climate? You can't afford it to make significant changes. You don't know where to start, that kind of thing. What resources and supports have you accessed most people have no idea, but some people say, oh no, I accessed this grant. And if I knew more about grants, I might access other grants. And then what additional supports would assist you to adapt to the changing climate? So that's a set. Okay, it provokes. You can pick from there. The idea is the weather impacting you? Are you doing anything to deal with it? If so, what? And interestingly, in the mall, some people said to us in other pop-ups, they don't talk about even Canada. They're like, I'm from the Philippines. The average temperature used to be 30. Now it's regularly 50. I'm terrified. I wanted to move home to retire. I can't do it. Or another weather person said she was from India. They're having massive landslides. The climate change is impacting people in different ways. So you don't even have to limit it to Toronto. It's like just talking to people. Okay, like what does this mean for you? And then the second set of discussion, if people want to know sort of examples of actions that they might be taking in response to hotter weather, wilder weather, we've put a few prompts here, like maybe they use weather alerts to check if it's too hot, you're not going to go for a big walk today. Are they installing or using their air conditioning more frequently? Are they going to the mall or like cooling centers or air conditioned spaces? I know a lot of people who don't have air conditioning that go to the mall when it's too hot. Are they driving or carpooling to avoid walking or cycling when it's super hot? And are they managing rain, right? Because some people are dealing with massive amounts of flooding because of increased rainstorms. So those are a few prompts, but there might be others. And then the second set of questions really relates to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and the types of things that people can do in those same three categories that Lindsay presented. So you can think about replacing a gas furnace or a boiler with an electric heat pump, but that's only relevant if you own your house, and like half of Toronto rents. So you can also talk to your landlord about improving home and building insulation. You can talk to landlords and employers about solar energy. You can replace gas and diesel vehicles with electric. That is only for a tiny subset of Toronto, not tiny, but a small subset who can afford it. Take alternative forms of transportation like transit, walking, and cycling, or reducing waste. So these questions are like, what changes, if any, have you been making to reduce your emissions? Are there barriers you've had faced, same thing as before, to reducing your emissions? What are they? What resources have you accessed as an incentive? What additional resources might help you overcome? And do you have any big ideas on climate adaptation or reducing emissions that you would like to share? So that's on the website. And so when you convene your group, you can just click here and work through it. And then when you go to the online survey, right away it says, and hopefully it's big enough, you can say, are you completing the survey as an individual or on behalf of a group discussion? And you'd say, I am completing it on the behalf of a group discussion. And then it takes you through to if there's a name of the group, how many people participated, and just space to answer each of those questions. That's it. That's the part that I wanted to go through and orient. I have bored Nan to death, but Jasmine is still here.
Can I ask?
I'm teasing.
She's just getting tea. I was listening. Carry on.
No, it's nice. So that's how it is. And we're really set it up so that if somebody wanted to lead a discussion, there's some prompts on how to do it. You do not feel restricted by it, but it's a resource that we can help. And if you need materials, we'll print and send them to you. So we'll send you a follow-up email.
Are you looking to collect the information? Is the city looking to collect the information? And if so, what will you be doing with that kind of information?
Lindsay.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great question. So as Nicole just showed, if you go to the website and click on the online survey link, there's an option to say that you're filling out the portion of the survey that's relevant, that will help to collect the answers to those questions that are laid out in the discussion guide. So the short answer is yes, the city is looking to collect the information. There's a lot of sort of open-ended spots where you can, type notes and sort of reflect the discussion as it was carried out. We will be looking at the results of all of the discussion points that are submitted to us. So they do go directly back to our team, actually, and we will be looking at the responses to everything. And then what's going to happen is collectively, the results of this public consultation, so the survey broadly, in terms of all of the individuals that fill it out, and then the specific discussions that take place and that are provided to us through that link, We will be reviewing all of that, and we will be taking all of this information into account as we develop our net zero action plan. So I didn't get too into the weeds on the action plan, but the action plan is essentially a set of actions that are going to need to be taken, that are going to need to take place across the city between now and, well, between 2026 and 2030. And we want those actions to be helpful and supportive to community members. We want them to try to eliminate barriers that people currently have to taking action. We want to focus both on individual action as well as like institutional and organizational and corporate actions. So that information will be reviewed and included as part of our summary of public consultation, but also the results of your discussions and anything you feed back to us will be considered as we develop that action list and the different elements that feed into that plan.
And to pick up on Lindsay's thing, there's like the city does modeling. That's one input. They have a climate advisory group. That's another input. They talk to all the divisions. That's another input. But when they hear from the public what they need, what barriers they're facing in order to kind of take actions, then the city could create a program or a policy or increase investments to like the stuff you're doing in the community through like a grant, Jasmine, like those are places where even the climate advisory group was part of the first action plan, create one. So the feedback helps the city figure out what it's going to do for the next 5 years. It's not the only input, but along with all these other inputs.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal. It's very important.
The bitter irony about climate change is that the people most responsible for it are actually relatively okay compared to, as mentioned, the other side of the world. So the people who least have to change their behaviors are the ones who are being impacted more. And I think on our end, Toronto's in a very comfortable position in terms of being, just having the infrastructure and having all the great things that we do. I found that people were overwhelmed, but simultaneously didn't understand how what the impact was. So just to give you an example, today, I think I just heard something about inhaling stuff from wildfires actually leads to you're more likely to get dementia from a certain amount of whatever it is, however they found that activation to happen. But I think a lot of people just don't even know the science is still coming out. And I guess I'm wondering, like, we're asking people about their challenges and like, should we be pairing in some education, or what is a way to get to assessing how much knowledge people have or how much they need, or whether that's really a need out there for them to even think about addressing challenges?
That's a really good
Go,
question.
Lindsay, I can jump in too. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, from the city's perspective, so we do try to understand, and I do agree with you. I think that the level of climate literacy is highly variable across the city. There are people who work in this space every day, people who volunteer their time to work in this space, and there are people who honestly don't know what climate change really is or what contributes to it. We've heard things like, well, there's no smoke coming out of my house doesn't emit greenhouse gases. Like, there's a fundamental lack of understanding, and that's fine, right? People who don't interact with this stuff all the time, there needs to be opportunities for education. The city does release, Kim, I don't know if you know this, there's a climate perception survey that's also released by the city. I don't know if it's every year or every 5 years, I can't remember. It's done by another group, but that seeks to understand sort of what are people's perceptions of climate, what are the current levels of education and understanding, and similar to how we're seeking input for our plan, the results of that survey help us understand where those gaps continue to be, because they will continue, and the city does try to do a lot of outreach and engagement and education as well.
take it where you, that's one of the reasons that we have the weather combined with the emissions, because we found that talking about the impact of the weather was a much easier road in than emissions, especially when people are like hearing the news and people say, well, climate change doesn't exist. So then they just assume that that's right. Like, but you can't deny that the weather has dramatically changed. And so then finding out, like going in on both roads is kind of why we designed the way we're talking about it. And the fact that the people kind of least impacted are the biggest contributors, like that's also super interesting, because the climate advisory group, we had focused primarily on the actions were related to buildings and transportation. And they're like, no, 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 you need people to use their voice, because all the people that are most impacted by climate change need to use their voice to pressure people to make the and not just pressure, but to increase the level of literacy and the amount that people are compelled to now adjust. So that kind of tension, that sort of social equity tension, is really, really front and center. And even in other discussions, people pointed out, like, how can the city do the, whatever this action when you're trying to address climate change? So internal tensions have also been raised. So people who are paying attention are really on it. Like, obviously you two are. Anyway.
What I found is that even if people believe there's climate change, they know what they should do. Like, they should drive their car less. They should eat less red meat, because, all these things they know, but it's not quantified. So I don't think they can say to themselves, well, if I stop driving my car 3 days a month or something, this will be the impact. And I can see a difference that I'm making. And I think that's what people are lacking. And I'm trying to design a challenge for our group and maybe go further. And I'm trying to figure out a way to get them to reduce, the ones that are willing, 10% of their carbon output for the next 6 months. And so I've been online trying to figure out, okay, if I reduce my heat in my house, because they're not going to change their furnaces, by so many degrees, how much percentage, but those sources are difficult to find. Does anybody have any advice? Because I'd like to get some action going, as well as giving you feedback is fine, but I think we've got to do something. And I'd love help with any of that. If anybody knows where to
Lindsay,
go.
I know something, but it's from, okay, so the first time I worked on this, what year was that? I think it was Vision 2020, and it was in 2000, and it was Toronto Public Health. So Nan, they hired a guy. So I would send Nan as a resource, given your particular goal, which you would have to check. And the city has not checked, but it's got pages and pages of what actions contribute how much to emission reductions. It's the same one, Lindsay, I shared with you right at the beginning. But it's old and out of date, but it did get produced. So I'm happy to unofficially send you this.
That would be fabulous, because it might just help me quantify things, which is what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
I got a number from the United States, saying that if we reduce our heat by 10 degrees, we'll reduce, no, it was 10 degrees for 8 hours a day, then we reduced by 7 to 9%. But that's American, and it could be right, or it maybe isn't right. So anyway, that's my problem. That's what I'm trying to do.
That's a good piece of feedback there. Like, Lindsay, if you guys can figure out how to incorporate that into the next 5-year action plan, so that people have that would be cool.
Yeah, like an individual level carbon footprint calculator that's up to date and relevant to Toronto, I think, because that's one thing I was thinking of, Nan, and it's not like a City of Toronto tool, but I know that there are pretty decent and pretty up-to-date carbon footprint calculators, and maybe what folks could do is go in and calculate their footprint today and then do it again in 6 months with some of those changes you're talking about. But if it's not getting to the granularity you're looking at with like degrees of difference for heating and cooling of homes and things, then Yeah, it would be a gap that, like, we're going to capture this conversation as well as part of this public consultation feedback. And that's something that we'll consider as maybe something we can provide to help support people in their shift and trying to get people to take action.
I found those carbon footprint places, and they're excellent, but they ask too many questions. For example, there was something about a house and how much heat you're losing. Well, who knows? You
Oh,
answer these questions. So
yeah.
I'm trying to narrow it down and say, okay, let's talk about the things we do know.
And you might want to
So
look
can
at
I-
a case study then.
Yeah.
Pardon?
You might
No,
want to look
go
at a
ahead.
particular case study that is like, say, so-and-so in X house where this type of house that loses this type of heat change their thermostat down this %. And so they have a kind of a average house or an average person, and that people can relate to a very specific example, but that the calculations have already been done. I mean, be something looking like, I can help you search for something like that. I'm a researcher. I don't know
Oh, are you?
one's
Oh, that would
available.
be wonderful, because I'm definitely not. But yeah, something like that could be helpful. And I'm trying to start at January 1st, so I want to get a move on this thing. New year,
Can
new
I ask
I'll
you,
show you
said,
guys this.
just last question, you said, well, people aren't going to change their furnaces. So I just wanted you to elaborate a little bit more on that. Like, have people thought about it, looked into the cost, looked into grants or anything like that?
No, my Rotary group is primarily older people, and so they're not going to probably go to the expense of that. If the furnace dies, then at that point they probably would change to something more economical, or electric. But I don't think you can expect people to go that far that quickly. I'm trying to do it gently,
Mhm.
and, you know.
Yeah. So I guess I would suggest some education around fuel switching for when the time comes. Like, you really
Oh
don't
yeah,
know when your
for sure.
furnace is gonna end. So, but I feel like people find it so overwhelming to think in a different paradigm, that like like maybe in this average house case study where like you switch the temperature, you can also look at fuel switching and how much that changes. So you don't necessarily have to do something tomorrow, but in your it can be part of your medium and long-term planning as well.
Yeah, I think you're very right. But I also think that you have to do things one step at a time, and you do one layer and then another. And I don't want to overwhelm people,
Hmm.
but you have very good points for sure. Yeah,
Uh,
and we will cover all of them gradually.
Nan, I have one more idea. You mentioned consumption of red meat, which you know because you brought it up about the impact of that. I heard a statistic somewhere, I'd have to dig it back up, that said something like, if everybody in the US ate one less hamburger a week, or whatever, every 2 weeks, the equivalent number of cars that would take off the road. And it was a number that was so huge that I couldn't believe it. And I thought if you boiled that down to the individual level, it would still be a really compelling story. So I don't know, I don't have anything, like I don't have a link offhand to give you, but if you look at some of the red meat consumption equivalents, I think that might be out there, and it's a really sort of hot topic. So I bet you could find something that would compel people in that way.
Yeah, thank you.
Honestly,
I will Google it. Yes.
Yeah.
Nice. This is a very practical and super good discussion. I'm just, I'm looking up the thing that I'm going to send you, which is a public resource that's not in circulation anymore for probably good reason. Was about, it's complicated. Like nobody's going to do it, but it might provoke you. Like what you're talking about now is way more practical, but it was sort of energy savings of about 20% over a 4-month pilot period. And so it was points. So they gave you like out of 2020 points, because it was 2020. They showed you all of the different things you could do and how many points it would get you. So it's just it'll provoke you.
That would be
but
great.
I'm not endorsing it. I'm just telling you it was a
I hear
public
you.
document 24 years ago.
Okay, I hear you. No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Anyway, that was kind of what we were hoping to do. Do you guys have any other you know what to do. You can go to the website, convene your group, and whatever you got is good with us. Like everything you're talking about now is super helpful. So if you're thinking these questions, you got to follow them. No. Like you use it if you got nothing else. Otherwise, you can say like, look, what's getting in the way of you doing your thing? You don't even know what I'm talking about? Okay, what part would be interesting to know more? You know, like take it however you want and fill out that online thing however you want. Whatever you've got in there, we're going to use.
Great.
Sounds good.
All right, that's it. Have a good night.
Sounds
Very
good.
informative.
Lindsay,
Thank you.
over to you.
Thanks, guys.
Lindsay, you're supposed to say thank you, bye. Sorry,
Oh,
I
that's
forgot.
it. I'll just quickly say thank you for your time. I know it's not insignificant to devote an hour of your evening, and we do appreciate you being with us. I hope this was helpful, and I think Kim has provided in the chat an email as well. So if as you're trying to go through your discussion guides or something comes up and you have questions about resources, please reach out to us through that email. That's a good way to get in touch. And yeah, I hope your discussions go well and look forward to seeing the feedback.
Great. Nicole, can you send me that file as well?
Yeah, I'll send it to everybody just
Oh,
so you
okay.
know.
Awesome.
But
Thanks.
I'm not endorsing it. I'm really just brainstorming.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I'm having trouble finding the email address on the chat. Can you tell me?
Oh, Kim,
It's
maybe you
probably
could
there.
No
just
problem. Everything that's in the chat will email you tomorrow.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's an easy way to do it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Have a good night.
And we capture